All right, so I'm on the Advanced IOTA again today, and today I'm going to be talking about wingovers. And I think, wingovers can be kind of tricky for people to learn because there's a lot going on. It's very timing dependent. There's quite a bit of feeling, and it takes people a while to wrap their minds around what they're actually trying to achieve. And I think part of that issue is people see the wingover and they think it's really about getting super high over the glider and doing these gigantic looping looking turns, which is what happens at the really highest levels. But people get so fixated on the wingover going high that they forget that it really has more to do with changing your direction. And when people are doing small wingovers, they're just going side to side, and they're sort of swinging back and forth. The glider is just sort of rolling back and forth one way or the other. So they get really fixated on thinking the wingover is about just rolling really high and then rolling back to the other side. But what we're actually trying to achieve is, if you imagine from a top-down view, sort of a gentle wingover is just sort of going side to side like this a little bit, and as it gets bigger, it turns in kind of an S turn, and it gets even bigger, it's like a 180. But real wingovers actually go past 180 degrees all the way up to 270. So they're going like this, and they come around, they go back this way, and they're doing these big, giant figure eights. So if you can wrap your mind around the turn direction more so than the height of the wingover, I think it helps people to understand what they're trying to achieve and get better performance out of their turns. And it's really important that we actually do get this turn in, because if you roll up really high in the wingover, it's kind of like going super high on a swing set where you get at the top and the chains go slack and then you fall down. The same thing can happen with your lines. So instead of just rolling, we have to roll and turn so the glider swings downward nose first instead of slipping across the side of the glider. So there's sort of the two components are, of course, the weight shift and the brake. And just like in doing big ear weight shift wingovers or weight shift only wingovers, all the weight shifting is going to happen at the top, at the highest point in the swing, and the brake input is going to happen just before my body swings under the glider. So I'll demonstrate this in a minute and what I'm going for. And I think a lot of people can become too timid on the brake. They're afraid to pull, and they don't realize that a lot of the scariness in the wingovers getting really high and losing energy and takes in collapses because they pull too late. In general, being early is safer on a wingover. If you pull the brake, start pulling the brake before you pass the bottom, you end up with a flatter, more spiral-like turn that has a lot of energy and it keeps tension in the lines, and it's really safe and the G-forces are higher. And the later you pull, the higher you go. So in the beginning, if you focus on pulling early and trying to really spot your turn and going all the way around, you can keep the wingover safer. And as you learn to understand the motion, then you can pull later and later and then make it high for show. So when I do the wingovers, I'm gonna call out 3 different phases. It's going to be shift, dive, and pull. And so shift is obviously when I am going to shift my weight. Dive is when I'm going to get to the top of the turn. I'm going to let the glider accelerate. And pull is when I'm going to initiate my inside brake. So, as wingovers get bigger and as I'm pulling with more and more energy, in order to keep the outside from collapsing, I'm going to have to add outside brake almost at the same time as the inside brake. And it actually can end up being quite a deep pull as well. Sometimes I can be pulling below the carabiners, and it's okay because I have all this speed and the angle of attack is really shallow. So when I do my pull, my weight shift's already going to be into the same side. I'm going to be climbing up really high. I'm going to be adding outside brake, and when I get to the top of the turn, I'm going to shift and I'm going to start to dive. And during the dive, I'm going to be releasing my brakes. And my goal is to release them as much as I can without the glider collapsing. And if I release too early or too fast, then the glider can collapse. So you'll see me during the dive, I'm not going to shoot my hands up all at once, but I'm going to try to release them as fast as I can. So I'm going to get started here. At the beginning, the timing is kind of quick, and as my pendulums get bigger and bigger, the timing spaces out. So I'm going to start from straight and level flight. I'm going to start to the left. So I'm going to shift and pull, and pretty quickly I have to dive, shift, pull, shift, dive, 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 pull, and to exit, I'm not gonna shift, I'm just gonna stay on one side, and I come out like a spiral. So you can see with the right timing, you can build them up pretty big, and it's all about controlling the rhythm, trying to keep them symmetric and controlled. There's a couple of rules to keep yourself safe. If you feel like, or if you take a collapse, of course, you should start over, like something's wrong with your timing, you don't have the right inputs, and it can throw you off, you lose energy, and it's really, usually the first kind of little mistake is okay, it's not a big deal. It's the second one that tends to bite you. So if you take a collapse, you're gonna end. If you feel like you lost the timing and you don't know where you are, you're gonna stop. And if you feel like you're gonna be super late, that you're in the wrong position to pull, then you're also gonna stop. And what the wrong position looks like is, during the dive, I'm more or less trying to have the glider dive straight down above me. If I don't quite have my inputs right and the glider's way off to the side, let's say I had just come out of a left turn, I need to go right now, and the glider's way over here and it's off to my side, I'm not in a good position to pull, because now I have to make up all this extra roll, and it's gonna take time, and that's how the glider can collapse. So I'm gonna do a couple where I'm going to pull a little late, so you can see what that would not look like, and I'm gonna not be so super late, so it won't be really dangerous or anything, but you'll see how I'll be off to the wrong side, and it's not so ideal. So I'm gonna start a couple, build them up a little bit, pulling here. Okay, now I see I'm gonna leave the glider off to the side here. This is like not really an ideal situation. See, I go really high and the glider kind of loses pressure. And again, if I pull late, kind of the same thing sort of happens. And you know, there's some tolerance here. I can pull like a little late and it's okay, but you can see right now that the glider is kind of deflating at the top of each turn. You can sort of see the cells losing pressure and then reinflating, and that's an early warning sign that your timing is off, it's not quite right. If you saw during the first set, the glider stayed super pressurized and totally open the whole way, and that's how I know that I'm doing a good job. And once you have your mind around the wingovers, or maybe if you're struggling to kind of perform them at the highest power, I can do a similar maneuver called the asymmetric spiral, and people use this term differently. Some people talk about like pulling a collapse and doing a spiral, or doing a spiral where they're just sort of going in and out of the spiral. Those are, people call them the same thing, but they're not the real asymmetric spiral. The real asymmetric spiral is a wingover continuously formed to the same side, so it's a similar motion. The difference is at the top, I'm gonna shift my weight to straighten out the dive, so I swing straight through, but then I'm gonna go back into the same side. And this one's a little safer than the wingover. There's less risk of kind of missing your timing and going too high and taking deflations. And it's a really good descent technique, and it's a great way to practice more powerful turns, get used to it. So this is what it's gonna look like. I'm gonna start with just a couple little wingovers, just kind of build some energy up. And I don't need a ton, I just go like this. Okay, now I'm gonna go only to the right. So I'm gonna shift, dive, and I'm gonna pull, and I'm gonna shift, dive, and I'm gonna pull, I'm gonna shift, dive, pull, shift, dive, pull, and to exit I go out like a spiral again. And you can see to make those work, I'm having to counter steer quite aggressively at the top. I'm not only just diving, but I'm having to use the outside brake to stop the turn, so I swing straight through. A lot of people, they end up kind of a wobbly spiral because they don't counter steer enough, and it looks kind of like this if I mess it up. So if all you're doing is you're kind of pulling, you're not counter steering enough, and like the glider does this, and you can see like the G-forces are always there, and I'm never getting the glider overhead, it's always off to the right of me. And it's like not really the asymmetric spiral. The difference, what I'm looking for is I need to do a turn, and I need to counter steer to straighten it out. And then you can see now I can go way higher. And in my opinion, the wingover is probably one of, if not the most important skill to cross-country pilots, not because you're going to be doing these huge, dramatic, showy turns, but you get used to using the energy of the glider, getting used to turning it, knowing when it's a safe time to turn, which is when the glider's in front of you and you're swinging under it, and knowing when you're in danger of swinging really high and taking collapses and taking deflations and all that stuff. So it's really good practice. I think it's even much more important than the full stall. So you know, build up to it. Always know like when to stop, when to end your set, but it's a really good skill for everyone to practice.